Just finished rinsing the dinner plates when I heard his car pull into the driveway. It was a Tuesday. I remember because I'd been watching Jeopardy the way I do every Tuesday since Gerald passed, and I'd just gotten the final Jeopardy question right, something about the Missouri Compromise, and I was feeling quietly pleased with myself. Then the headlights swept across the kitchen window, and I thought, that's odd. My son never comes by on weeknights anymore. I dried my hands on the dish towel and went to the front door. He was already on the porch, his jacket half unzipped, a duffel bag sitting at his feet like he'd packed in a hurry. He looked thinner than the last time I'd seen him, which had been, I counted backward, almost 6 weeks. Going somewhere? I asked. He looked up, and something passed across his face. Not guilt, exactly, more like the expression of a man who has already decided something and is only now realizing he has to say it out loud. I need to talk to you, Mom. His name is Spencer. He's 44 years old, and he is my only child. I let him in, put on coffee I had a feeling neither of us would drink, and sat across from him at the kitchen table that Gerald and I bought at an estate sale in 1987. Spencer put both hands flat on the surface like he was steadying himself. I'm leaving, he said. With Renata. Renata. I turned the name over in my mouth, like something I couldn't quite identify. He'd mentioned her twice in the past 3 months, both times so briefly I'd almost forgotten. A woman he'd met at a conference in Atlanta. She worked in investment consulting, which he described with such vague enthusiasm that I'd let it pass without asking follow-up questions. I was trying to be the kind of mother who didn't pry. Leaving, I said. Where? Portugal, probably. Maybe Spain. We're still figuring it out. I looked at him. 44 years old, and he was sitting at my kitchen table telling me he was moving to Europe with a woman I'd never met. I wanted to ask 100 things. I asked the one that felt most pressing. For how long? He didn't answer right away. That pause, that 3-second pause before he said I'm not sure, was the moment everything began to shift under my feet, though I didn't know it yet. He left that night around 9, hugged me at the door, a real hug, longer than usual, the kind you give when you know something the other person doesn't, and then he was gone. I stood in the doorway until his taillights disappeared around the curve of Sycamore Lane, and then I went inside and looked at the coffee I'd never poured and thought, something is wrong. I didn't know what. I just knew. I have lived 67 years on this earth. I raised a child alone after Gerald's heart attack in 2009. I managed our finances, our property, our retirement accounts without ever missing a payment or making a reckless decision. Gerald was the dreamer in our marriage. I was the one who balanced the checkbook. So when I say I knew something was wrong, I want you to understand what I mean. I didn't know yet. But some part of me, the part that had been quietly competent for 4 decades, was already paying attention. 2 weeks passed. Spencer texted once a photo of a beach, blue water, just a sun emoji and a heart. No location, no phone call. I texted back asking if he was okay, and he said, "Great, don't worry," which is what people say when they very much want you not to look too closely. My grandson Oliver was staying with me that month. He just turned 14, and his mother, my daughter-in-law from Spencer's first marriage, a kind woman named Gwen, had asked if he could spend the summer with me while she handled some medical issues of her own. I'd said yes without hesitating. Oliver and I had always had an easy relationship. He was a quiet kid, the kind who reads at the dinner table if you let him and doesn't consider it rude, just efficient. He was also, I was slowly realizing, extraordinarily good with computers. Not in the way kids are good with phones. Good in the way that means something else entirely. He'd set up a new router for me in the first week, configured it in some way he explained carefully and I understood not at all, and then reorganized my entire laptop's filing system while watching a documentary about deep-sea fish. When I thanked him, he shrugged in that way teenagers have and said, "It was a mess, Grandma." No offense. None taken. It was a Thursday morning about 2.5 weeks after Spencer's visit when I noticed the first thing. I was logging into my online banking First Federal, where Gerald and I had kept our joint account for 31 years to pay the electric bill. The balance on the screen stopped me cold. I leaned closer to the monitor, the way you do when you think your eyes might be betraying you. Our savings account, the one Gerald and I had built over 30 years, steady deposits, reinvested dividends, the careful accumulation of 2 people who'd lived below their means, their entire adult lives, read $4,211. Read $4,211. It should have read closer to $340,000. I sat very still for a moment. I am not a woman who panics easily. I clicked through to the transaction history and started reading. 11 transfers, spread across 19 days, each one between $18,000 and $29,000, all transferred to an external account I didn't recognize. The transfers had started 4 days before Spencer came to visit me. The last one had gone through the morning after he left. I picked up the phone and called the bank. After 40 minutes on hold, I was told that the transfers had been authorized using Spencer's login credentials. He was a joint account holder, had been since Gerald passed, and I'd added him to help with estate matters, and that because they were authorized transactions, the bank would need to complete an investigation before any action could be taken. The investigation could take up to 90 days. 90 days. I put the phone down and sat at the kitchen table, in the same chair I'd sat in when he told me he was leaving, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a very long time. Completely, utterly, alone. Oliver found me there 20 minutes later. He'd come downstairs for cereal and stopped in the kitchen doorway when he saw my face. "Grandma, what happened?" I looked at my grandson. 14 years old, bowl of Cheerios in one hand, hair still messy from sleep. And I thought, I am not going to lie to this child. So I told him. He sat down across from me and listened without interrupting, which is more than most adults manage. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Can I see the account?" I turned the laptop toward him. He studied the screen for a long moment, scrolling through the transactions slowly, methodically. His expression didn't change much, but something behind his eyes shifted into a mode I hadn't quite seen before. "What was her last name?" he asked. "Renata." I told him I didn't know. Spencer had never said. "Okay," he said. He pulled his own laptop from his backpack. He always had it with him, the way some kids carry a basketball, and set it on the table. "Don't call anyone else yet. Give me a little time." I almost said, "Oliver, you're 14. But I looked at his face and didn't. I went and made us both tea instead. What Oliver did over the next 5 days, I can only describe partially, because I didn't understand all of it. What I understood was the result. He started with Spencer's email. Spencer, it turned out, used the same password for nearly everything, a combination of his college graduation year and our dog's name from his childhood, a dog named Biscuit who had died in 2003. Oliver found this out not by guessing, but by finding an old password in a cloud backup Spencer had synced to a shared family account years ago and apparently forgotten about entirely. Once he was in the email, he started reading. He didn't tell me everything at once. He came to me each evening at the kitchen table and laid out what he'd found, like he was presenting a report, quietly and without drama. The first evening, Renata's full name was Renata Voss. She had at least 3 email addresses. 2 of them were associated with a company called Meridian Wealth Advisors, LLC, which had been registered in Delaware 8 months ago and had a website that looked professional but had been built using a template Oliver could identify by the footer code. The second evening, Meridian Wealth Advisors LLC had no physical office. The address listed on their website was a UPS store in Wilmington. The company had a registered agent but no employees on record. Spencer had wired money not just from our joint account, but from his own personal accounts. As well, Oliver had found the transfer confirmations in the email. All told, Spencer had moved over $400,000 in a period of 3 weeks, most of it to accounts associated with Meridian, some of it to a personal account in a name Oliver hadn't been able to identify yet. I sat with that number for a long time. The third evening, Oliver came downstairs looking different. Not upset, exactly. More like a person who has opened a door expecting a closet and found a hallway. "There are other people," he said. He showed me the emails. Renata, or whoever she actually was, had been running variations of this same approach across at least a dozen other targets. The emails Oliver had found in a secondary account showed coordination with at least 2 other people, different names, different states. The targets were men, mostly between 40 and 60, typically recently widowed or divorced. Spencer wasn't special to her. Spencer was a line item. I read those emails 3 times. The anger I felt was not the hot, immediate kind. It was the cold, settling kind, the kind that makes you very quiet and very focused. "What do we do with this?" I asked. Oliver looked at me steadily. "I think we do it right," he said. "All the way right, not just for you." Over the next week, Oliver built a file. That is the only word I have for it. He compiled every email, every transaction record, every shell company registration, every domain registration for the fake Meridian website, every connection he could trace between Renata Voss and the other names in those coordination emails. He organized it into folders with dates and labeled everything clearly. He cross-referenced the wire transfer destinations with public financial records he found through SEC databases and state business registries tools that were publicly available. He was careful to point out nothing he wasn't allowed to access. He printed everything, twice. We drove to the library together one Tuesday afternoon and used their printer because I was worried about running out of ink, and Oliver stood at the machine feeding pages through with the same calm efficiency he'd used to fix my router. He packaged 3 copies of the complete file, one for the FBI's Internet Crime Complaint Center, which he explained was the correct federal agency for this type of fraud, one for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, one for the Delaware Attorney General's office, since that was where Meridian had been incorporated. He also, on his own initiative, compiled a separate summary document, simpler, shorter, in plain language, and sent it to a financial crimes reporter at a mid-sized newspaper in Atlanta, where Spencer had met Renata at that conference. He'd found the reporter's byline on 3 previous articles about investment fraud in the Southeast. "You can't control what they do with it," Oliver said. "But at least it's out there." I asked him if any of what he'd done was illegal. He looked at me with an expression I recognized. It was the same expression I apparently make when someone asks me a question I find slightly insulting, and said, "Everything I accessed was either authorized or public. I didn't hack anything that wasn't accessible. I was careful." I nodded. Then I asked him one more thing. "Does your mother know how good you are at this?" He almost smiled. "She thinks I just play video games." We filed the reports on a Wednesday afternoon. Oliver walked me through the online submission step by step, and I filled in every field myself because he said it was important that it came from me, as the primary account holder and victim. He sat next to me and corrected my spelling of Wilmington twice. When I hit submit on the last form, we both sat quietly for a moment. "Now we wait," Oliver said. "Waiting is hard. I want to be honest about that. There were nights that month when I lay awake running through the numbers, calculating and recalculating what was left, what I could do, how long I could manage. Gerald and I had planned our retirement carefully over 30 years. The house was paid off. Social Security covered basics. But that savings account had been the cushion, the margin between comfort and worry. Without it, I was not destitute. But I was no longer comfortable. And that distinction matters a great deal when you are 67 and alone. Spencer called 6 weeks later. I was in the garden when the phone rang. I almost didn't pick up. Then I thought, he's still my son. Whatever he is still my son. So I answered. He was not calling from a beach in Portugal. He sounded like a man in a very small room, speaking quietly, carefully. He told me he was in trouble. He told me Renata had disappeared, taken the last transfer and vanished, and he'd come home to find his apartment cleared of anything of value. And now the FBI had contacted him, and his own attorney was telling him the situation was very serious. He did not yet know about Oliver. I listened. I let him say everything he had to say, and then I said very quietly, "Spencer, you took $336,000 from our savings account, the one your father and I built over 30 years. You transferred it to a woman you met 4 months ago, and you left the country without telling me." Silence. "I know," he finally said. "I need you to understand something," I told him. "I don't know yet what kind of relationship we have going forward. I genuinely don't know that. But I want you to understand that what you did was not just financial. Do you understand what I'm saying?" He said he did. I hung up and went back to the garden. The tomatoes needed tying up. I focused on that. The FBI investigation moved slowly, the way federal things do. But it moved. I received a call from an agent in the Atlanta field office 11 weeks after we filed. She was professional, thorough, and she told me that the complaint I'd submitted had been one of 9 that helped them build a case. There were 14 identified victims across 6 states. The total amount defrauded was somewhere north of $2 million. Renata Voss was not her real name. The woman's actual name, the agent told me, was something else entirely. I won't repeat it here, and she had 2 prior fraud convictions, one in Florida in 2016 and one in Texas in 2019, both under different names. She was arrested in Miami, trying to board a flight to Cancun 6 months after my complaint was filed. She was sentenced to 11 years in federal prison. Spencer cooperated with the investigation. He had not known the investigation concluded That Meridian was fraudulent. He had been manipulated, targeted specifically because of his access to our joint account and his emotional vulnerability following his own difficult divorce 2 years prior. His cooperation resulted in a reduced charge. He pled guilty to 1 count of unauthorized account access for his role in the transfers and received 3 years of supervised probation and mandatory financial fraud awareness counseling. He paid back what he took from me. Not all at once. I didn't expect that. But over time, in monthly transfers that showed up in my account on the 15th of every month, consistent as rain. He called me on my birthday that November, the first time he called on that date since his father died. We are not what we were. I'm not sure we ever will be, but we are something. I'm still deciding what. As for Oliver went back to his mother at the end of the summer, taller, quieter, having consumed approximately 40 bowls of Cheerios and 6 seasons of a nature documentary series. I let him pick each evening. His mother called me 2 days after he got home and said, "Mom, he told me what he did. Is it true?" I said it was. She was quiet for a moment. He said he just did some research. He did, I said. He also probably saved my retirement. She started crying, which made me cry, and we talked for almost an hour. Oliver and I text now. Not every day, he's a teenager and has better things to do, but often enough. Last week he sent me an article about a new type of shell company fraud he'd read about in a legal journal. I sent back a question mark and he replied with a 3-paragraph explanation that I mostly understood. He is, his school counselor told his mother last fall, showing strong aptitude for computer science and law. There's a summer program at Georgetown he's been accepted to. It focuses on digital forensics and financial crime prevention. He asked me to write his recommendation letter. I sat down at the kitchen table. The same table, always the same table. And I wrote 4 pages. I told them about a boy who came downstairs for cereal and found his grandmother sitting alone with a number on a screen that didn't make sense. I told them about the way he said, "Give me a little time," like it was a reasonable and manageable thing. I told them what patience looks like at 14. What integrity looks like before it's been tested by anything that matters. I told them, the world is full of people who will take from you the thing you spent your whole life building. Every now and then, if you're fortunate, someone sits down across the table from you and says, "Let me help you get it back." I was fortunate. I am, it turns out, never too old to be surprised by that. I've been sitting with this story for a while now, trying to figure out what it actually taught me. Not what I want it to have taught me, what it actually did. Here's what I keep coming back to. Every consequence in this story followed directly from a choice. Not fate. Not luck. Choices. Spencer chose to let someone in without asking hard questions. He chose convenience over scrutiny, excitement over caution. He was lonely and someone handed him warmth at exactly the right moment, and he reached for it without looking at what was attached. I understand that. I'm not saying I don't. Loneliness is a real thing, and people who exploit it know exactly what they're doing. But the choice was still his. And the cost of that choice landed not just on him. It landed on me, on a savings account Gerald and I had built through 30 years of small decisions and smaller luxuries we passed up. That's the part people don't always reckon with. When you make a careless choice, you rarely absorb all of it yourself. Renata, whatever her real name is, made choices too. Years of them. Calculated. Practiced. Patient choices to find people at their most vulnerable and take from them the things they'd spent lifetimes building. She was good at it. She'd done it before and gotten away, and she did it again, and for a while it looked like she'd get away again. But 11 transfers leave a trail. Shell companies have registration records. Email accounts have histories. The thing about believing you're invisible is that you stop being careful, and the moment you stop being careful, you leave a door open. Oliver walked through that door. What strikes me most about what Oliver did, and I've thought about this more than I probably should, is that it wasn't just intelligence. Intelligence alone doesn't sit across a kitchen table from a crying grandmother and say, "Give me a little time," with that particular kind of steadiness. That's something else. That's character that's been quietly developing for years in small moments nobody was grading him on. In the way he actually listened when people talked. In the way he thought a problem through before speaking. In the way he cared genuinely about something being right rather than just resolved. He didn't do what he did for recognition. He did it because it was the right thing to do and he had the ability to do it. And those two facts together felt, to him, like sufficient reason. That's the kind of person you become. Not because someone tells you to, but because you've spent years paying attention to what actually matters. I think about the word resilience a lot these days. People use it to mean bouncing back, returning to where you were. But I'm not sure that's what it is. I didn't return to where I was. I couldn't. What I did was figure out how to stand on ground that had shifted and decide that standing was enough. That some things that get taken don't have to take everything with them. The money mattered. It still matters. But I woke up the morning after we filed those reports and made coffee and watched the light come through the kitchen window and thought, I am still here. I still know what I know. I still have this. That, I think, is what resilience actually looks like. Not restoration, just continuation, just choosing one more time to keep going. Spencer and I are still figuring out what we are to each other. That's honest. Some bridges don't fully rebuild. They become something different, something you cross more carefully, paying more attention to where you put your feet. I'm okay with that. I've had to make peace with a lot of things I didn't choose, and this is one more. But Oliver got into that Georgetown program. He called to tell me on a Thursday morning, and I was standing in the garden, and I cried in a way I hadn't since Gerald died. Not from sadness, but from the particular overwhelming feeling of watching something good take root in the world. The world will try to take things from you. That part I cannot change. But every now and then someone sits down across from you and decides that what was taken matters enough to fight for. That's not luck. That's character meeting circumstance. And when it happens, you hold on to it. I am 67 years old. I have been surprised before. I expect I will be surprised again. I am counting on it.